Before the press conference began, Gavin Newsom's team was confident everything was perfect. The media was under control, questions had been arranged, and the speech highlighting Newsom's immigration policy successes was ready. But they hadn't. Accounted for one thing, the document that had fallen into J.D. Vance's hands that would reveal the whole truth. That day, the California governor's mask would fall, and he would flee from his own press conference in a way unprecedented in history. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The California State Capitol building gleamed under the morning sun as journalists and camera crews filed into the Rose Conference Room. Staffers, in crisp suits, distributed press packets, each bearing the governor's seal. A meticulously crafted collection of statistics showing California's humane and effective immigration policies. Behind the scenes, Gavin Newsom adjusted his navy blue tie, the same one he'd worn during his CNN interview last week. His communications director, Melissa Rodriguez, reviewed last-minute talking points. "The numbers look great," she said, scrolling through her tablet. Border county crime down 12%, immigrant employment up 22%, and the sanctuary city policy saving. Taxpayers $89 million in enforcement costs. Newsom nodded, his trademark confidence unshaken. And questions? All screened. The LA Times will ask about Republican criticism, giving you the chance to hit back at their inhumane border policies. CBS will ask about your future plans, opening the door for presidential speculation. Perfect, Newsom said, checking his reflection one last time. Let's remind America what real leadership looks like. What neither of them knew was that 17 miles away at the Sacramento Sheraton, Senator J.D. Vance was reviewing a document that had arrived by courier the previous evening. The manila envelope bore no return address, just his name written in blue ink. "Are we sure this is authentic?" Vance asked his chief of staff, Martin Keene. Keene nodded grimly. "Triple verified. Our contact at the California Department of Finance confirmed it. This is the real internal audit, the one that was supposed to be destroyed." Vance studied the 12-page report, its pages marked with red confidential stamps. The document detailed the true impact of Newsom's immigration policies, diverted funds, manipulated statistics, and most damning, a private memo from Newsom, himself acknowledging the unsustainable reality while instructing staff to maintain the public narrative regardless of actual outcomes. Vance checked his watch. "Newsom's press conference starts in 30 minutes. We could release this to friendly media," Keene suggested. "Maximum impact without—" "No," Vance interrupted, sliding the document into his briefcase. "He's been lying to people's faces for too long. I want to see him try to lie to mine." Back at the Capitol, the Rose Conference Room had filled to capacity. Network cameras lined the back wall, reporters from major outlets occupied the front rows, and state officials stood along the sides. The room hummed with the familiar pre-event chatter, journalists comparing notes, photographers adjusting lenses, everyone waiting for the star of the show. At precisely 10 a.m., Melissa Rodriguez approached the podium. "Good morning, Governor. Gavin Newsom will make a statement on California's Immigration Success Initiative, followed by questions. Please hold all questions until indicated." She stepped aside as Newsom entered from the side door, his smile radiating confidence. Applause broke out, mostly from his staff and friendly reporters, but enough to create the impression of widespread approval. "Thank you all for coming," Newsom began, his voice strong and measured. "Today marks the 2-year anniversary of California's Immigration Success Initiative, and I'm proud to share our remarkable achievements." He launched into well-rehearsed talking points, gesturing to the large screen behind him displaying colorful charts, all trending positively. Crime down, employment up, costs reduced, success at every turn, while others choose division and fear. He continued, his voice rising with practiced indignation. "California chooses compassion and results. Our approach isn't just more humane, it's more effective." As Newsom spoke, few noticed the tall figure entering through the back door. J.D. Vance moved quietly, nodding to a security guard who recognized him. He took a position against the wall, briefcase in hand, watching intently. "The numbers don't lie," Newsom declared, pointing to his charts. "Our policies have reduced border county crime by 12%, while saving taxpayers $89 million. Actually, a voice called from the back, your own internal audit says those numbers do lie. The room fell silent, heads turning to locate the source. Newsom squinted against the lights. Senator Vance, he said, recovering quickly with a politician's smile. I wasn't aware you were joining us. Perhaps you can wait for the question period. Vance stepped forward, moving down the center aisle. I have something more relevant than a question, Governor. Rodriguez moved to intercept him, but Newsom waved her off, his face maintaining its camera-ready composure. We always welcome dialogue across the aisle, Senator, but this is a scheduled press briefing. Yes, a briefing based on fiction, Vance replied, now halfway to the podium. He opened his briefcase and removed the document. I have here the California Department of Finance's internal audit of your Immigration Success Initiative, not the version released to the public, but the actual findings that your office ordered buried. Murmurs spread through the room. Cameras swiveled toward Vance. Rodriguez whispered urgently into her phone, while Newsom's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Senator, I appreciate theatrical politics, but we're discussing serious policy here, Newsom said, his voice still steady. If you have questions about our methodology— This isn't about methodology, Vance interrupted, now standing just feet from the podium. It's about deliberate deception. He held up the document so cameras could capture the confidential stamp. According to your own Department of Finance, border county crime hasn't decreased 12%. It's increased 23%. The program hasn't saved $89 million. It's cost an additional $156 million. And most importantly, your office has known this for 8 months. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Photographers' flashes strobed. And state officials exchanged panicked glances. Newsom's face had changed, his practiced smile giving way to something harder. Where did you get that document? From someone in your administration who still believes the public deserves the truth, Vance replied, his voice calm amid the chaos. Rodriguez rushed to the podium, whispering frantically to Newsom, who nodded, almost imperceptibly. We'll need to verify the authenticity of whatever the senator is presenting, Newsom said, fighting to regain control. Our published reports undergo rigorous verification. Like this verification? Vance interrupted, flipping to page 8 of the document. He began reading aloud. Governor reviewed actual numbers and directed team to maintain public narrative regardless of findings. Direct quote, we can't afford political fallout from changing course. Maintain the story at all costs. The room fell silent. Every camera focused on Newsom's face as the color drained from it. That's taken out of context, he stammered, his legendary composure cracking. Vance continued relentlessly, turning to page 10. Or perhaps this context. Budget director raised concerns about potential violations of federal reporting requirements. Governor advised this conversation didn't happen. A reporter from the Los Angeles Times stood up. Governor, are you saying this document is fraudulent? Before Newsom could answer, another voice called out, Senator Vance, will you be releasing this document to all media outlets? I've brought copies for everyone, Vance replied, gesturing to his aide who had entered with a stack of folders. The chaos intensified. Reporters abandoned their seats, rushing toward Vance's aide. Camera operators pushed forward, jostling for better angles. Newsom stood frozen at the podium, his script now useless, his carefully crafted narrative collapsing in real time. Rodriguez grabbed his elbow, whispering urgently. Newsom nodded, then leaned into the microphone. We need to verify these allegations. This press conference is— His voice faltered, for perhaps the first time in his political career. Gavin Newsom, the man who always had the perfect response, found himself speechless. He stepped back from the podium, ignoring reporters' shouted questions. Rodriguez moved between him and the cameras, announcing, The governor needs to address an urgent matter. We'll reschedule this briefing. But the damage was done. As Newsom retreated through the side door, a CNN reporter captured the moment on her phone. California's golden boy governor fleeing his own press conference, his face ashen, his political armor pierced by a single document. Outside the conference, Room in a secure hallway, Newsom grabbed Rodriguez's arm. How did this happen? Who leaked it? I don't know, she replied, her own composure shattered. Legal is reviewing it now, but if it's authentic… If? Newsom snapped. You know it is. The question is, how do we contain this? Meanwhile, in the Rose conference room, J.D. Vance had taken the vacant podium. Cameras that had been set up for Newsom's triumph now broadcast a very different story. The American people deserve the truth, Vance said, his voice steady. Not carefully crafted narratives, not manipulated statistics. Just the truth, even when it's difficult, even when it doesn't serve political ambitions. As he spoke, copies of the document circulated through the room. Reporters flipped pages, highlighted passages, sent photos to editors. The bombshell wasn't just exploding, it was multiplying. Within 20 minutes, the story hit social media. Within an hour, it led every major news website. By noon, the hashtag Newsom's Lies was trending nationwide. In his private office, Newsom watched the coverage in stunned silence, surrounded by equally stunned advisors. His phone buzzed constantly, allies seeking guidance, donors demanding explanations, party leaders assessing the damage. We need a statement, his press secretary urged. Something strong, refuting the core allegations. Newsom shook his head. The document is real. We all know it. Then we control the narrative, another advisor insisted. We say you were misled by staff, that you've launched an investigation. Into what? Newsom snapped. Into my own words? My own directives? There's my signature on page 12? The room fell silent. For years, Gavin Newsom had cultivated an image of the perfect progressive leader. Compassionate, yet pragmatic. Idealistic, yet effective. That carefully constructed persona now lay in ruins, shattered by 12 pages of truth he'd never expected to see the light of day. His chief of staff finally broke the silence. What do you want to do, Governor? Newsom stared out the window at the Sacramento skyline. Get me Senator Vance on the phone. 20 minutes later, in a private conference room, J.D. Vance sat alone, waiting. He'd declined all interview requests, instructing his team to let the document speak for itself. When his phone rang, he wasn't surprised to see the California governor's office number. Senator Vance, Newsom's voice was subdued, lacking its usual theatrical quality. Governor? Vance replied simply. You've made your point. What do you want? Vance paused. I don't want anything from you, Governor. This isn't about political gamesmanship. Everything is political, Newsom replied, a hint of his old confidence returning. Name your price. There is no price, Vance said. The truth isn't a bargaining chip. It belongs to the people of California, the ones suffering the real consequences of your policies while you feed them fictional success stories. Silence hung on the line. You know this destroys me, Newsom finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. No, Vance corrected. The truth doesn't destroy good leaders. It only destroys those who fear it. The call ended. Vance sat quietly, for a moment, then stood, gathered his things, and left the room. He'd come to Sacramento with no team, no press entourage, just a document and a conviction that the truth mattered. By evening, the political landscape had shifted. News networks ran split-screen coverage. On one side, the moment Newsom fled his own press conference. On the other, Vance at the podium, calmly exposing years of deception. Conservative media celebrated Vance as a truth-telling hero, while even liberal outlets struggled to defend Newsom's actions. If the document is authentic, and it appears to be, an MSNBC analyst admitted, this represents a profound breach of public trust. Social media exploded with the footage of Newsom's retreat. A clip of his face, the exact moment when Vance, read the damning memo, was turned into countless memes. The Newsom's Lies and a Vance truth bomb dominated Twitter trends. In San Francisco, a city that had long been Newsom's political stronghold, protesters gathered outside City Hall. Not Republicans or conservatives, but progressives who felt betrayed. We trusted you, read one sign. Lies don't help immigrants, read another. Maria Sanchez, an immigrant rights advocate who had once enthusiastically supported Newsom's policies, spoke to a local reporter with tears in her eyes. We believed him when he said things were improving. Our communities were still suffering, but we thought it was just taking time. Now we know he knew the truth and chose to hide it. Back in Sacramento, in the governor's mansion, Newsom held an emergency meeting with his inner circle. The mood was grim, the conversation blunt. "The document is devastating," his chief legal counsel said. "Not just politically, but potentially legally. There are federal funding questions, misrepresentations to the legislature." "Can we discredit it?" someone asked. The counsel shook his head. "It's authentic. Multiple staffers have already confirmed privately to media that they recognize the contents." "What about Vance?" another advisor suggested. "We dig into his past, find something to distract." "No," Newsom interrupted, his voice hollow. "That's exactly the kind of politics that got us here." He stood up, walking to the window. For a moment, he looked not like a powerful governor, but like a man facing the consequences of his choices. "I need to make a statement. Not a denial, an acknowledgement." His team exchanged shocked glances. Acknowledging the document's authenticity would be political suicide. "Governor, with all due respect," his campaign manager began, "we need to fight this." "Fight what?" Newsom turned, his face showing a rare vulnerability. "The truth? It's right there in black and white. My signature. My words." He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for perhaps the first time in public memory. "Schedule a press conference tomorrow morning." As the team filed out, his oldest advisor remained behind. She'd been with him since his days as mayor of San Francisco, through his rise to governor, through every triumph and scandal. "Gavin," she said softly, using his first name, something she rarely did in professional settings. "This isn't the end, you know. Politicians have survived worse." He gave a bitter laugh. "Have they? I built my career on being the honest progressive, the one who delivered results, not just promises." He shook his head. "Vance didn't just expose a document, he exposed the lie at the heart of my public identity." In Ohio, Senator Vance returned to his hotel room after declining a dozen interview requests. His phone continued to buzz with notifications. Conservative media hailed him as a hero. Mainstream outlets sought exclusive comments. Political analysts debated whether this moment would elevate him to presidential contender status. Vance ignored it all, sitting at the desk and opening his laptop. He wasn't interested in the spotlight. He'd come to Sacramento with a purpose, and that purpose had been fulfilled. Now he had work to do. His chief of staff, Keene, knocked on the door. "Senator, Fox News is offering a primetime exclusive, and CNN wants to." "No," Vance said simply. "But this is a huge opportunity," Keene persisted. "Your profile has never been higher. We could leverage this into—" "This isn't about me," Vance interrupted. "It's about holding power accountable. The moment I start using this for personal gain is the moment I become exactly what I exposed today." Keene studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Understood. What do you want me to tell them?" "Tell them I'm focused on my work for the people of Ohio," Vance replied, turning back to his laptop, "and that the document speaks for itself." As midnight approached, the document had been analyzed by legal experts, political commentators, and immigration specialists across the country. The consensus was unanimous. It revealed a deliberate, coordinated effort to mislead the public about the effects of California's immigration policies. More damaging than the statistical manipulations were Newsom's own words, captured in meeting notes and memos. "Perception is reality," he'd written in one margin note. "The narrative matters more than the numbers." In another section, he'd dismissed concerns about misrepresenting data to federal agencies. "By the time anyone figures it out, we'll have moved on to the next initiative." These weren't just policy disagreements or spin. They were admissions of deliberate deception from a man who had built his brand on authenticity and transparency. Morning dawned in California with a sense of anticipation. Governor Newsom had announced a 9 a.m. press conference, his first appearance since fleeing the podium the day before. The Rose conference room was even more packed than before. Security was tighter, the mood tenser. Reporters who had been friendly To Newsom for years now sat stone-faced, their trust broken. At precisely 9 a.m., Melissa Rodriguez approached the podium, her usual confidence replaced by a solemn professionalism. The governor will make a brief statement. There will be no questions at this time. Newsom entered, and the change was immediately apparent. His suit was still impeccable, but his face showed the strain of a sleepless night. The easy smile, the charismatic glow, both were gone. He approached the podium slowly, placing a single sheet of paper before him. He looked up, scanning the room, meeting the eyes of reporters who had covered him for years. "Good morning," he began, his voice subdued. "Yesterday, Senator J.D. Vance presented a document during our press briefing. I've had time to review it thoroughly, and I can confirm that it is authentic." A murmur swept through the room. Reporters leaned forward, shocked that Newsom had admitted the document's authenticity so directly. The internal audit contains information that contradicts our public reporting on the Immigration Success Initiative. Newsom continued, his voice strained but steady. "I take full responsibility for this discrepancy. The decision to maintain our public narrative despite contradicting data was mine and mine alone." The room was utterly silent now. No camera clicks, no whispers, just the sound of history unfolding. I still believe, that our approach to immigration is more humane than the alternatives. But in my determination to defend that approach, I crossed a line. I allowed political considerations to override my commitment to transparency. Paused, swallowing hard. The Gavin Newsom standing before them now was almost unrecognizable from the confident, charismatic figure they'd known for years. Effective immediately, I am ordering a full, independent audit of all data related to the Immigration Success Initiative. The results will be made public, unredacted, and unedited. Another pause. Longer this time. I am also announcing my resignation. As Governor of California, effective at noon tomorrow. The room erupted. Reporters jumped to their feet, shouting questions, cameras flashing in a frenzied strobe. Newsom raised a hand, asking for quiet. I entered public service to make a positive difference. Somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that protecting my political future was necessary to protect that mission. I was wrong. He folded his prepared remarks, tucking them into his pocket. The people of California deserve a leader they can trust. Right now, that isn't me. Thank you. Without taking questions, he turned and walked from the podium. This time, it wasn't a retreat. It was a reckoning. The news of Newsom's resignation spread like wildfire. Within minutes, it dominated every headline, every broadcast, every social media platform. Political analysts scrambled to contextualize the moment. Was this the quickest fall from grace in modern political history? What would it mean for California's future? For the Democratic Party's national prospects? In Washington, D.C., reactions split along predictable partisan lines. Republicans celebrated the exposure of what they called progressive hypocrisy, while Democrats distanced themselves from Newsom while trying to contain the damage to their broader agenda. But in an unexpected twist, Senator J.D. Vance remained largely silent. He issued only a brief statement. This was never about bringing down Governor Newsom. It was about bringing truth to the people of California. I wish him well as he reflects on his next chapter. That restraint, the refusal to take a victory lap, caught many political observers by surprise. In an era of gotcha politics and partisan gloating, Vance's subdued response stood out. He's playing a longer game, a CNN political analyst suggested. By focusing on the principle rather than the person, he's positioning himself above the typical political fray. 3 days after Newsom's resignation, as California's lieutenant governor prepared to be sworn in, J.D. Vance finally agreed to a single interview, not with Fox News or any conservative outlet, but with Maria Sanchez, the immigrant rights advocate, who had felt betrayed by Newsom's deception. They sat in a small community center in East Los Angeles, surrounded by families directly affected by immigration policies. No fancy lighting, no makeup teams, just two people having an honest conversation. "Why did you choose to expose the document this way?" Sanchez asked. "You could have leaked it anonymously, used it for fundraising, built a campaign around it." Vance nodded, considering her question. I could have, but then it would have been about politics, not truth. I wanted Newsom, and everyone watching, to understand that this wasn't a partisan attack. It was a moment of accountability. Many immigrant advocates fear that exposing failures in progressive policies only strengthens anti-immigrant sentiment. Sanchez pressed. Were you concerned about that? Of course, Vance replied. But I believe hiding the truth hurts vulnerable communities more in the long run. These families, he gestured to those around them, deserve honest assessments of policies that affect their lives, not comforting fictions. The interview continued for an hour, touching on immigration policy, political accountability, and the erosion of trust in public institutions. Throughout, Vance maintained the same calm, direct approach he'd displayed at Newsom's press conference. My final question, Sanchez said. The document revealed that crime in border counties has increased, not decreased as Newsom claimed. Many will use this to justify harsher immigration policies. What's your response? Vance leaned forward. The solution to failed progressive policies isn't necessarily conservative policies. The solution to dishonest leadership isn't different dishonest leadership. What we need, what these families need, is honest assessment of complex problems, followed by practical, humane solutions. He continued, I believe we can secure our borders while treating immigrants with dignity. I believe we can enforce our laws while acknowledging the humanity of those seeking a better life. But we can only build those balanced solutions on a foundation of truth. As the interview concluded, a mother approached Vance with her young daughter. She spoke softly in Spanish, which Sanchez translated. She says that politicians usually only come here for photo opportunities before elections. She wants to know why you came today when there's nothing to gain. Vance knelt to eye level with the little girl, who shyly clutched her mother's hand. Tell her I came because her daughter's future matters more than my political career, and because the truth shouldn't be a partisan issue. 2 weeks later, as California adjusted to its new leadership, the full impact of what became known as the Vance document continued to reverberate through American politics. The independent audit Newsom had ordered before resigning confirmed everything in the document and uncovered additional discrepancies. The Justice Department opened an investigation into potential misuse of federal funds. 3 senior California officials faced criminal charges for falsifying reports. But beyond the immediate political fallout, something more profound was happening. Voters across the political spectrum were asking harder questions of their elected officials. Journalists were digging deeper into government claims. Citizens were demanding verification, not just assertions. In Sacramento, the new governor's first official act was to establish a Truth in Governance Commission, tasked with ensuring that all public data was accurately reported, regardless of political implications. In Washington, a bipartisan group of senators introduced the Public Data Integrity Act, which would create criminal penalties for government officials who knowingly misrepresented statistical information to the public. And in town halls across America, constituents began bringing their own copies of government reports, asking representatives to explain discrepancies and justify conclusions. The Vance effect, as political scientists termed it, wasn't a shift to the right or left, but a demand for authenticity from voters exhausted by spin and deception. 6 months later, Gavin Newsom emerged from seclusion for his first interview since resigning. Gone was the slick political persona, replaced by a man who seemed both humbled and liberated. I lost my way, he admitted. I became so convinced of the righteousness of my vision that I thought the ends justified the means. I was wrong. When asked about J.D. Vance, Newsom's response surprised many. He did the right thing, not the politically expedient thing, but the right thing. I resented him for it at first, but now, strangely, I'm grateful. Grateful? The interviewer asked, clearly surprised. Yes, Newsom nodded. He forced me to confront the person I was becoming. That's a painful gift, but a valuable one. 1 year after the press conference that changed everything, J.D. Vance received an unusual invitation to speak at a California university typically hostile to conservative voices. The auditorium was packed, with students holding signs representing both support and protest. Vance began his speech with a statement that silenced even his critics. "I didn't come here to talk about Republican versus Democrat, conservative versus progressive, or any other political division. I came to talk about a more fundamental choice we all face: truth versus convenience." He continued, "When I confronted Governor Newsom with that document, I wasn't acting as a Republican senator. I was acting as a citizen who believes that democracy can only function when leaders are honest with the people they serve." Throughout his speech, Vance emphasized that accountability wasn't partisan. He criticized Republican officials who had manipulated data, Democratic leaders who had hidden inconvenient truths, and media figures on both sides who prioritized narrative over accuracy. "The American experiment requires informed citizens," he concluded. "Not citizens fed comfortable lies that match their preconceptions, but citizens equipped with messy, complicated truths that challenge their thinking." As he left the stage to unexpected applause, a student journalist asked one final question. "Senator Vance, would you have exposed that document if it had implicated a Republican governor instead?" Vance smiled. "The answer I want to give is yes, without hesitation. I hope that's true. I believe that's true. But the more honest answer is that we're all tested by our principles when they become inconvenient. That day in Sacramento, I passed the test. I hope I'd pass it again, regardless of the target." That honest self-reflection, the acknowledgement of human fallibility while striving for something better, resonated across political lines. It wasn't the performative humility of a typical politician, but the genuine introspection of a leader grappling with the weight of responsibility. The story of J.D. Vance and Gavin Newsom became more than a political scandal. It became a parable about truth in an age of alternative facts, about accountability in an era of deflection, about the courage required to stand on principle when compromise seems easier. As one commentator noted, "The most remarkable aspect isn't that Vance exposed Newsom's deception, or even that Newsom ultimately took responsibility. It's that the American people, so accustomed to cynical politics, responded to this outbreak of honesty by demanding more of it." In the years that followed, as J.D. Vance's political star continued to rise, he kept a framed copy of that document in his office, not as a trophy of political victory, but as a reminder of what happens when leaders choose convenience over candor. And in California, where Gavin Newsom had once been the golden boy of progressive politics, a quiet transformation was underway. His spectacular fall became the foundation for a new political culture, one where leaders understood that their first obligation wasn't to protect their vision or their legacy, but to tell their citizens the truth, however uncomfortable it might be. The confrontation between J.D. Vance and Gavin Newsom in that press conference wasn't just a dramatic political moment. It was a turning point in how Americans thought about leadership, accountability, and the courage to face inconvenient truths. In a political landscape often defined by its ugliest aspects, this story revealed something unexpected: the power of integrity to transcend partisan divisions and remind citizens what they should expect from those who govern in their name. As Vance himself said in that university speech, "The truth isn't Democratic or Republican. It doesn't have a political agenda. It simply is." And when we begin to see it that way, as a foundation rather than a weapon, we take the first step toward healing our divided nation. This story of truth and accountability reflects the deep crisis of trust in American politics today, where citizens increasingly doubt whether leaders from either party are telling them the truth. The confrontation between J.D. Vance and Gavin Newsom illustrates how a single moment of accountability can send shockwaves through an entire political system. In today's polarized society, we too often ignore deception from our side while eagerly exposing it on the other side. Vance's approach, focusing on the principle rather than partisan advantage, offers a blueprint for a healthier democracy, one where citizens demand honesty from all leaders, regardless of political affiliation. The lesson for Americans in 2025 is clear. We must be willing to value truth over partisan comfort, to demand transparency even when it challenges our preferred narratives, and to recognize that democracy thrives not on comfortable lies, but on uncomfortable truths. Thank you for watching this story about integrity in leadership. Don't forget to subscribe and comment below with your thoughts. We'll see you in the next video.